This hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee will discuss the contributions of dreamers to their communities and our country and the need for Congress to finally take action to protect them. 24 years ago, I met a young woman in Chicago named Teresa Lee. She had the opportunity to go to the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, but she learned when she started to fill out her application for the first time, learned that she was undocumented, even though she had been brought to the United States and had lived here since she was 2 years old. She was confused, afraid, and searching for options to pursue her dreams in the only country she ever called home. I checked into it. The laws were brutal. It required her to leave the United States for 10 years and apply to return. I was frustrated by the lack of options in our immigration system for these young people who were brought here as children and infants by their parents. Teresa inspired me to introduce the DREAM Act. I started to speak in Illinois and on the Senate floor about the challenges these young Americans faced. Their stories stay with us because we see ourselves reflected in them. Many dreamers would approach and whisper to me, sometimes with great fear and obvious fear, "Senator, I'm one of those children you're talking about." More than 2 decades later, dreamers are not whispering anymore. I'm proud to see them, like some of our witnesses today, become fierce advocates for America to live up to its promise of equal justice. I want to share a short video in which several dreamers tell their stories in their own words.
My name is Tolu Olugumi. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. The only thing worse than having a dream dashed or being rejected by my own country is losing my father and not being able to say goodbye.
I was 12 years old when my mother and I boarded a bus from our village in Mexico to the border. This country quickly became my home. I had a degree in mechanical engineering, but no one would hire me in this field without a legal status. Over the years, I have met many dreamers who also want to join the military and serve the country that they love. I sincerely hope that one day they will be able to follow in my footsteps on the list.
When I was 9 years old, my family made the sacrifice to leave their home country of Peru to go in the search of the American dream. Dreamers like myself have built our whole lives here. At the age of 22, pre-DACA in 2012, I couldn't work or drive, and my bike was my only mode of transportation. With DACA, by age 23, I was able to get a job as a software developer with General Motors and be able to buy my first home. We are small business owners, teachers, nurses. We have our families here and deep roots in our communities.
Too many young people like me are carrying burdens that we were never meant to carry.
I believe my story is just one example of what dreamers can do if they are given the chance to come out of the shadows and give back to our country.
Only Congress can fix this, and we must pass a permanent legislative solution.
Well, it was 23 years ago when I first introduced the DREAM Act with the retired Republican Senator Orrin Hatch to provide relief for these young Americans. We actually had a debate between Senator Hatch and myself as to who would be the lead sponsor. The first 2 years, he won the debate, and he was the lead sponsor on our bill. Unfortunately, he didn't continue to support it over the years. But I'm happy that my colleague and partner across the aisle, Ranking Member Lindsey Graham here, has joined me as the lead co-sponsor for this legislation for the past several Congresses. I genuinely thank you for your support. While the bipartisan majority of senators has supported the DREAM Act on numerous occasions, unfortunately it has been filibustered when it comes to the floor. Because of Congress's inaction at the urging of myself and the late Republican Senator Richard Lugar, President Obama announced Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, better known as DACA, in 2012. More than 830,000 dreamers have been protected by DACA since 2012. For the record, DACA requires reapplication every 2 years and a thorough background check for everyone who qualifies for DACA. Thanks to DACA, many young people have been able to pursue higher education, start businesses, buy homes, and raise families. DACA allows dreamers to match their talents to labor market needs, increase their wages, and contribute to the American economy. Researchers estimate that in 2022, DACA recipients earned $27.9 billion and contributed nearly $2.1 billion to Social Security and Medicare. This program has helped so many young Americans come out of the shadows and into the light. I've shared many of their stories over the years, over 140 times on the floor of the Senate. I look forward to hearing directly from some of them today. Officer Michelle Soto-Rodriguez today is one of these people. Ongoing litigation brought by Republican attorneys general threaten everything that DACA recipients have built in this country. Even if the courts find, as they should, that DACA is lawful, a future administration can try to end the program. We saw this when the former president attempted to eliminate DACA, and clearly he would try again if he's given a chance. Sadly, many dreamers cannot access the DACA program today. Almost 100,000 dreamers have had their applications and lives placed on hold by court battles, and many other dreamers are ineligible for DACA because they arrived too late to qualify. DACA was always intended to be a temporary stopgap program until Congress acts on a permanent solution. The time is long past due for Congress to do our part and provide a path to citizenship to dreamers. Poll after poll shows that the vast majority of Americans agree, both sides of the aisle. And when we establish this path to citizenship, all Americans realize will reap benefits from that experience. Let me add that Congress should act also to secure our border. These are not mutually exclusive goals at all. Unfortunately, one would-be presidential candidate stopped a bipartisan effort on the floor just weeks ago to try to deal with border security. I hope that they will relent and the Republicans will join the Democrats in a bipartisan effort. James Lankford, a conservative Republican from Oklahoma, led the effort, and we should honor him by passing this bill. I now recognize Senator Graham for opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've enjoyed working with you on the Dreamer issue. It is a very sympathetic group of people who came here as young people without being asked to be brought and spent a lot of time in America with generally no place to go, and I understand that very much so. Unfortunately, since we started this discussion, the last 3 years have been a complete, utter disaster for American immigration policy. We'll start with the numbers here. When you and I first started talking about comprehensive immigration reform, we were talking about what to do about the 11 million. We thought there were about 11 million people here legally. If you were a felon, you had to leave, you had to take an English exam, you had to, not be a criminal, pay a fine, get in line. That sort of all made sense. 11 million people, that's a lot of folks, but we were trying to manage that population. Since President Biden's taken office, 7.7 have come in. Some people believe it's closer to 10. So the last 3 years have been a complete, utter disaster. The American people have suffered, particularly the border communities and states. The policies of this administration have proven to us as Republicans over here that there really is no serious effort to control this. Senator Lankford, I appreciate his efforts. The folks, not just President Trump himself, but Chad Wolf and others, thought that the bill was inadequate to the task in terms of border security. So the bottom line now for us is if you legalize anybody in this environment, whatever problems you have get exponentially worse. So I don't ever see anything on the DREAM Act coming anytime soon until we stop the abuse of parole and some underlying problems. And right now, my concern is different than yours. You're concerned about the DACA population. I think we should all be concerned. I'm most concerned about a border completely open and the FBI director saying that wherever he looks, he sees blinking lights. So fixing DACA is not my concern right now. My concern is regaining control over our sovereignty that's been lost, trying to deal with the rise of terrorism throughout the world, and make sure another 9/11 doesn't happen to America. I've never seen more threats to the country writ large than I do now. A broken border is a lethal cocktail. Rising threats overseas and a broken border here. Fentanyl poisoning is a higher priority for me right now. It's not that I don't care about the dreamers, I do. But you got more Americans dying from 18 to 35 from fentanyl poisoning than any other cause. So that's my concern, is to try to get China to stop poisoning America, to do something with the drug cartels that are making billions of dollars, sending drugs and human trafficking, to go after them. So right now, you're going to find, at least on our side of the aisle, the biggest concerns are the crime associated with legal immigration, the national security threats associated with legal immigration, the poisoning of America associated with illegal immigration, to try to get control over chaos. That's my biggest concern. And until those concerns are addressed, nothing else is going to happen on legalization.
I respect you very much, and we disagree on issues and agree on others, and I'm glad for that. I cannot imagine how we can hold these young people accountable for what you're concerned with. They came here as children and infants. All they wanted to do is be part of the country that they pledged allegiance to in the flag in the classroom every single day. They go through extensive background checks to make sure that they have nothing in their background that raises any serious question. They work hard under conditions which no other American faces. No financial assistance to go to college except by private means, and an exceptional situation where they could be literally deported at any moment. I concur with you that the issues at the border are critical and important, and that's why I supported Langford's bill. I think we need to return to that.
If I may, just very briefly, and I don't want to prolong the hearing here. Number one, if we did start legalizing people now, I think you're sending a signal to keep coming. The DREAM Act population that exists today, I've tried to work with you to get a resolution. There have been 7 to 10 million people come in. What do we do about the young people in the last 3 years brought here? No fault of their own. They've been here 3 years. I don't see, what do we do about them? I mean, are we going to have another round of DREAM Act with twice the number of people? Is there any end to this where people come brought by the parents and you wind up staying and becoming a citizen? If that's the model to get to be a citizen, it's never going to stop. I don't mind dealing with the DREAM Act population, but I don't want to incentivize endless waves of immigration. And that's what we would be doing.
I've been asked by the chairman and ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee if they can make statements. It's a little unusual, but I think it's appropriate today. Senator Padilla, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today, and I want to thank both the chairman and our ranking member, Senator Graham, for committing to this hearing on the urgent need to protect dreamers in America. This is a matter that historically has enjoyed bipartisan support, including from Ranking Member Graham, who currently co-leads the DREAM Act with Senator Durbin. Now, as we all know, Dreamers are a group of young people that until earlier this year, actually, had been included in every immigration negotiation for nearly a quarter of a century. So today, I hope that we can join together to have an honest, focused conversation about how Congress can act to help the millions of dreamers living in the United States who have been in limbo for far too long. Now, colleagues, earlier this year, you'll recall that in the annual State of the Union, President Biden himself recognized and recommitted to providing a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. Sitting in the gallery that night was my guest for the State of the Union, Dr. Denise Rojas Marquez, a DACA recipient from California. After growing up and seeing family members lack access to basic health coverage, she dreamt of serving her community as a physician. Now, graduating from college and medical school and becoming a doctor is tough enough for anybody, but additional barriers for those who are undocumented. But despite that, she went on to earn her medical degree and served on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not irrelevant, folks. Do you guys remember just a couple of years ago, every night on the news at 4 o'clock, people banging pots and pans out the window to show appreciation for frontline workers, for essential workers during the COVID-19 pandemic? Those workers included millions of long-term undocumented Americans, including doctors working in emergency rooms, like Dr. Rojas Marquez. She's the embodiment of the American dream and the life-changing power of the DACA program. But because of Congress's failure to act, even today, her dream and so many others are under constant threat. As we've heard today, in the opening remarks from the chairman, there are over 500,000 DACA recipients in the United States. And there's more than 2 million dreamers. Now, everybody in this room is paying close attention. We can appreciate the distinctions between DACA and dreamers. But for a lot of the general public, not so much. So let's be clear about who we're talking about. When we say there's more than 2 million dreamers, that's people who are eligible for DACA, but may not be part of the program today for a variety of reasons. Maybe they were once upon a time and aren't anymore, and that's part of the problem. Because unlike DACA participants, current DACA participants, dreamers that aren't in the program have no work authorization, and they enjoy no sort of even temporary protection from deportation. Now, in the year 2024, we know the impact that millions of dreamers can have and do have on our country. They're not just students. They don't just serve in the military. We're also consumers, contributing billions of dollars to the economy every single year, benefiting the federal tax base, benefiting state tax revenues, and the community services that those tax revenues provide. And yet DACA recipients are forced to plan their lives between court decisions and renewal applications, 2 years at a time, fearful of what the future might hold in the event of a bad court ruling. Now, dreamers who have lived in this country for years, since they arrived as children, live in uncertainty and constant fear of deportation from the only home they've ever known. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I think we can all agree that it is long past time to modernize our outdated immigration system. And as our Republican colleagues have begun to remind us today that, yes, we also need to make sure that the border is secure, is orderly, and our reminders should also be humane. But we ought to be able to work to address the challenges at the border, right? It's a very different population, those individuals, those families who are just now coming, trying to enter the United States, in many cases to seek asylum. It's a very different population than dreamers and others who have been in the United States already for years and years, in some cases decades, working, contributing to the economy, the resilience of communities, raising families. We've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We can't let one issue hold us up from making progress on another issue that both Democrats and Republicans are on the record, have publicly stated they're in support of. So we can and must work towards the immigration reform that can provide certainty for these long-term immigrants we call dreamers. And I'll end, Mr. Chairman, with just this. I'm hopeful, despite the exercise of the bipartisan negotiations from several months ago, that left Dreamers out. It's wrong. That's not the new starting point for negotiations. Dreamers and others must be on the table in future proposals and votes. I think we ought to bring it to the floor for a vote. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, your names are on the DREAM Act today. Join me in asking Senator Schumer, Leader Schumer, to bring it for a vote and let the public know where each and every senator stands on the DREAM Act and on helping dreamers in every community in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to make a statement. Legal, orderly, and humane immigration policy has been the lifeblood of America. But that's not what we're talking about. In fact, the Biden administration has outsourced our immigration policy to criminal cartels for at least the last 3 years. The public record will demonstrate that I've been very sympathetic, as we all are, to the plight of these children who came here through no fault of their own and who've been placed in litigation limbo for the last 12 years. President Obama, who issued the executive memorandum, admitted multiple times that he did not have the authority to do this, but then he did it, resulting in the litigation that we've seen over the last 10 years. I think it's tragic that as a result of this action by the Obama administration, these young people have been led to believe that this somehow provided a firm foundation for their integration into the great American heartland. But unfortunately, the conversation we're having here today needs to be placed in the proper context. 9 million illegal entries into the United States since the Biden administration took over, 108,000 dead Americans last year because of drugs that come across the southwestern border. The criminal organizations that move millions of people across know they're overwhelming our capacity to deal with it. And so then that's when when the Border Patrol is off the front lines, that's when the drugs come across, including the fentanyl that killed 71,000 Americans last year alone. And then there's the 400,000 unaccompanied minors that have been placed with sponsors in the United States. And the Biden administration says it's not our responsibility. We don't know what's happening to them. We don't know whether they're being trafficked for sex, being forced into labor, or what. I was in the Oval Office when President Obama said he was contemplating issuing an executive memorandum on the DREAM Act. We asked him, I was among those who asked him, please give us a chance to pass legislation. And we know that he declined to do that, and here we are today. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction that deals with immigration policy, but we haven't had a single hearing on fixing the broken system. Maybe components of it, like looking through a soda straw while ignoring the fire that's occurring all around us. Well, Senator Graham did a good job of explaining the numbers of where we are today, but it's become increasingly difficult for the Biden administration to sweep this problem under the rug. They have the tools available to them, the same laws that were in effect during the Trump administration, to deal with much of this problem, but they simply refuse to do so. And then there's the pull factors that Senator Graham alluded to. For example, last month, the city of Denver, Colorado published a newcomer's playbook welcoming migrants into their community. As a part of their intake process, they suggest immediately offering migrants onward transportation to another destination. Just this week, the mayor of Chicago had to scrap a poorly conceived plan to relocate minors to a neighborhood in South Chicago ahead of the Democratic National Convention. And President Biden continues to poison the well to good faith bipartisan attempts to address this problem. It's impossible for us to pass legislation dealing with this larger problem when President Biden simply refuses to enforce the law, creating a huge magnet to more and more immigration. For example, authorities that were intended to be exercised on a case-by-case basis, the so-called parole authority, has been exploited by President Biden to stand up entirely new programs that Congress has not agreed to. For example, the Department of Homeland Security set up a program to grant parole and work permits to 30,000 people a month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. That's 360,000 people a year, simply waved into the country, given a work permit, and there you go. The president has also expanded eligibility under the already unlawful Central American Minors Program to certain adults. Last year, the administration extended Venezuela's temporary protected status designation to cover nearly 500,000 Venezuelans who illegally immigrated to the United States. The Biden administration knows, just as the Obama administration did when it came to DACA, that these programs are built on quicksand. Anyone enrolled in these programs is likely and has in fact experienced tremendous uncertainty, not as a result of the policies we have in place today, but the policies they put in place before, as far back as 12 years ago. Now you've heard our colleagues say, well, we just need to take care of the dreamers and DACA recipients. But the fact is they don't seem to care about the rest of the problems, including the 108,000 dead Americans as a result of the drugs and 400,000 minor children placed with sponsors that they simply have lost track of. So unfortunately, Democrats, through their unwillingness to address these manifold problems and the president's continued abuse of authorities, have made it impossible and foolish for us to take up a standalone DACA bill at this time.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. I'd like to clarify two things. The Langford bill was a bipartisan effort to deal with the border. Senator Langford is a conservative Republican from Oklahoma, whom I respect very much. When the bill was called on the floor of the Senate, 4 Republicans voted for the bipartisan bill. None of them serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee. So to fault this committee for not moving the issue forward when every senator was given a chance to go on the record on a bipartisan bill, which everybody agreed was a positive step, unfortunately, only 4 Republicans went forward with it. And secondly, when it comes to the pull factor, I have to just tell you, America is a pull factor. America is the incentive for people wanting to come to this country. We should respond with good laws that keep us safe, number one, but number two, have an orderly process for immigration. I think that goes without saying. But the notion that we're going to somehow discourage America from being a magnet for people, it has always been a magnet for people. We are a nation of immigrants. Let's do it in an orderly way, and for goodness sakes, let's not hold those protected by DACA today responsible for every problem in the immigration system.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond just briefly, the problem is not passing new laws. The problem is enforcing laws that are already on the books. I have zero confidence that if we were to pass the bill that was negotiated between Senator Murphy and Senator Langford and others, that the Biden administration would suddenly have an epiphany and say, hey, we better enforce the law. That's not going to happen.
Well,
So that's the main problem, is an administration that refuses to enforce the law. We can pass all the laws we want. If the administration refuses to enforce them, we're going to be in the same place we're in now.
The senator from Texas has never voted for a bipartisan immigration bill. He has an approach to this which is not going to end with solving the problems we're facing. I hope he'll join the effort. I was prepared to stand behind Senator Langford, a Republican senator, and the majority of Democrats were as well, even though there were provisions in there which I didn't like at all. You have to be prepared to make concessions to make progress.
Mr. Chairman, you know that's a low blow. I come from a border state. This is ground zero for my state and my people, not folks that live in Chicago, though you're experiencing some of the consequences of that. But suggesting that I have been unwilling to negotiate and engage in good faith negotiations on immigration policy is a lie. And you know it, because I've been there at the table with you and Senator Graham and others for many, many years. And I resent the fact that you decided to impugn my integrity by suggesting I had no interest in a solution. That is a false statement, and you know it.
The Langford roll call will speak for itself. Before we turn to our witnesses, let me lay out the mechanics for the rest of today's hearings. After I swear in the witnesses, they'll each have 5 minutes to testify. Then there'll be a round of question. Each senator will have 5 minutes to speak. Please remain within your allotted time. Today we welcome 5 witnesses. I'll introduce the majority witnesses, and the ranking member Graham will introduce the minority witnesses. Our first witness is Officer Michelle Soto-Rodriguez. She is a police officer from Blue Island, Illinois. As I shared on the Senate floor in December, Officer Soto-Rodriguez is a DACA recipient who's lived in the United States since she was 9 years old. She graduated magna cum laude from Governor State University in Illinois in December of 2022. Next week, the committee will mark National Police Week when we honor our law enforcement officers, so it is fitting that you are here today. Officer Soto-Rodriguez, thank you for joining us. Our second witness is Tom Wong, an associate professor of political science and the founding director of the U.S. Immigration Policy Center at University of California in San Diego. He has fielded a national survey to analyze the experience of DACA recipients in the past 9 years, and thank you for being here, Professor. Finally, we welcome back to the committee Maria Gabriela Pacheco, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the DREAM, a nonprofit organization that provides scholarships to Dreamers since they are ineligible for federal student aid. Ms. Pacheco is an immigration rights leader who first testified before Congress in April of 2013, 11 years ago, at a hearing on comprehensive immigration reform. I first met Gaby more than 14 years ago, and in 2010 she led the Trail of Dreams, a 4-month walk from Miami to Washington, D.C., some walk, to highlight the plight of Dreamers. Gaby put Dreamers on the national political agenda and inspired me to ask President Obama to establish DACA. She became a naturalized citizen last year. Congratulations. Welcome back, and thanks for your leadership. Ranking Member Graham, would you like to introduce your witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have Tammy Nobles. She is a realtor from Norfolk, Virginia. She volunteers part-time as president of the Down Syndrome Association of Hampton Roads. She is mother of Kaylee Hamilton, and she'll tell us about that story, and she joins us today to share her story, and I know it's difficult, but thank you so much.
At this point, I ask the witnesses to stand and be sworn, please, if you raise your hand.
Fine. Sorry about that, Jessica. As Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies. She's been at the center since 1992. She's an expert on immigration policy, including immigration enforcement, border security, visa programs, benefits, public safety. She received her master's from Georgetown and a bachelor's degree from Washington College in Maryland. Thank you, Ms. Vaughan.
If the witnesses would please stand and raise their right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect all the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Officer Soto-Rodriguez, you may proceed with your opening statement. Make sure you have the button engaged. I don't think your microphone's on yet.
You might want to push it toward you, yeah. Is the light on?
Pull the microphone a little closer to you. There you go. Not working well. Can you?
Put a quarter in it.
If you could ask Ms. Vaughan to share her microphone. Is it possible to move it?
Is it broken?
All right.
There it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, for the opportunity to testify today. I am Officer Michelle J. Soto-Rodriguez, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share my journey as a DACA recipient, now proudly as a police officer serving the city of Blue Island, Illinois. When I was 9 years old, my parents made a tough decision on my behalf to uproot our family from Mexico. seeking a better future for us in the United States. I remember the moment we joined my father in Blue Island, making the beginning of our new life. However, the transition was challenging. From navigating language barriers to experience understanding undocumented status, each obstacle shaped my path. My journey was not easy. I have experienced incredible moments like buying our first American home and expanding our family. I have also lived through incredible difficult times. I was denied my driver's license because I didn't have papers. And I had to watch my parents sleep in a car after my dad was unable to find a job. My sophomore year of high school, my mom, little sister, and I were struck by a car while driving. We were afraid because we were undocumented, but the police officer who came to the scene showed compassion. The moment inspired me to serve in law enforcement. In pursuing my dream, I encountered a lot of challenges along the way. In 2012, when President Obama announced Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, known as DACA, my life changed again. A huge door opened to continue pursuing my goals. DACA was the key for me to continue my education and get a job after high school. I worked 2 jobs and continued my education. I attended Moraine Valley Community College. I graduated with associate's degrees in criminal justice and liberal arts. Based on the degrees and the career I wanted, I got a scholarship and attended Lewis University. Despite working hard and getting good grades, I couldn't pursue my dream because of my status. I wasn't eligible for financial aid, so I had to leave Lewis University to help my sister attend school. Even though I had a scholarship, I still needed to pay $9,000 out of my pocket per semester. Having a work permit was a blessing. At the same time, my study was holding me back from getting into my dream job. For a long time, I could not apply to be a police officer because of my DACA status. I realized that I might not be able to work in law enforcement, but I did not give up. In 2019, I registered at Governor State University to complete my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. While attending school, I was working full-time. I was able to manage my time and do homework and attend classes. I got a job at a high school, the same high school I attended to. Through that job, I worked closely with the police department, and I met Chief Vaughan and Commander Sepesi of the Blue Island Police Department. In May 2022, I graduated magna cum laude. Chief Vaughan asked me why I had not applied to be a police officer, and I told him it was because I had DACA. He advocated for Blue Island to change its rules and hire DACA recipients as police officers. Finally, in 2023, Mayor Fred Bilato and the City Council changed the rules. Once I heard the news, I submitted the application right away and got hired as a part-time police officer. On February 14, 2023, I got sworn in, and I started training in the part-time academy. This year, I finally completed my training, passed the test, and got hired as a full-time police officer for Blue Island. Now I know 2 other DACA recipients who are training to be police officers. And now that I am a police officer, I know how much we need them. Having DACA allows us to become successful in life and to make a difference in the country that has seen us grow up. For many of us, the country that we come from is just in our memories. The only country we know is here, where we stay. This is our home, the country that many of us serve proudly. If DACA recipients had a pathway to citizenship, it will be in favor of the economy of the country because we will still support the country without fear. If DACA one day is going to get removed, all of our lives will go back into limbo, and we will not be able to continue with our current jobs or education. The economic and social benefits of fully integrating Dreamers into their communities will be a massive boost for our families. Communities and countries will have come to see our contributions over the 12+ years of DACA protections. All one is to pursue our dreams without fear of deportation or discrimination. As a police officer, I understand the importance of safety and security. However, even in uniform, I'm reminded of the limitations imposed by DACA status. If DACA were to end, my career in law enforcement will end, and I love being a police officer. I will lose everything, my job, and probably even my home. I wouldn't be able to support my family financially. Senators, I urge you to consider the human stories behind the policy debates. Behind each statistic is a dreamer with hopes, dreams, and aspirations. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for recognition of our humanity and our contribution to this nation. Congress, I put my life on the line for this country every day. I am ready to become a citizen of this great nation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Officer. Ms. Vaughan?
Thank you. Last month, nearly 180,000 people crossed our border illegally. More are on the way on planes, trains, boats, and on foot. And they keep coming because under Biden administration policies, the vast majority are being released into the country with the opportunity to remain for years, possibly even with a work permit. Another 45,000 gotaways arrived after evading apprehension. Another 44,000 inadmissible aliens were allowed to enter in March under the administration's unlawful parole programs, including via the CBP-1 appointment system. Also in March, 6 illegal border crossers were apprehended who were hits on the terror watch list. All told, nearly 7 million illegal, inadmissible aliens have been allowed to enter since the start of this administration. This has created some serious, urgent problems around the country. In Massachusetts, for example, lawmakers are struggling to find the money to cover the $915 million price tag for the emergency shelter system alone for 1 year because of the influx of illegal migrants. This doesn't include the cost of schooling, medical care, and other services they need. In Montana, leaders of tribal communities have defied death threats from Mexican drug cartels to appear in the media and before Congress to plead for help with the devastating influx of cartel drug trafficking operations in Indian country that they say is due to the open border policies, and they are asking why the illegal migrants are getting more attention and funding than their communities of First Americans. Throughout the country, we've seen a new wave of disturbing incidents of child labor trafficking and other abuse involving thousands of unaccompanied minors who were smuggled here and released to unvetted, non-parental sponsors, many to end up working on car part assembly lines, poultry processing plants, or in abusive domestic servitude or even sex trafficking. On top of the mass catch and release policies at the border, the Biden administration has dismantled interior immigration enforcement to the point where even many criminal illegal aliens are often protected from deportation and remain here, free to prey on new victims. Arrests and removals of criminal aliens are less than half of what it was prior to 2021. And some of the worst case scenarios resulting from these policies have already happened, which we'll hear a little bit more about today. And just a few weeks ago, one of these released migrants was charged with aggravated rape of a disabled 15-year-old girl at a Comfort Inn in Rockland, Massachusetts that was being used as a shelter for newly arrived migrants. He reportedly came directly from Haiti in June 2023 under the unlawful CNHV parole program, supposedly with a sponsor in New Jersey. Less than a week ago, a citizen of Guatemala was arrested in Lake Worth, Florida, accused of snatching an 11-year-old girl off the street and raping her in his van. He crossed the border illegally in January, was released, and went to Florida with an immigration court date scheduled in 2027. In at least 4 cases I know of, Border Patrol agents have released men who were hits on the terror watch list. These are just a few snapshots of the consequences of the current policies. This is at the top of the minds of public safety officials, state lawmakers, and municipal leaders that I speak with all over the country. It's also the top issue for voters. According to the most recent Gallup poll, for the 3rd consecutive month, immigration is considered to be the most important problem facing the United States, and that's the longest sustained stretch for this to be the top problem issue in the last 24 years. The arguments for a DACA amnesty or any amnesty might be more compelling if we had not just gone through 3 years of an uncontrolled border and did not just have to absorb 6 or 7 million new illegal migrants. The Immigration and Nationality Act in its current form is sufficient to put an end to this crisis if only it were enforced and fully applied. The Biden administration is choosing to wave in inadmissible aliens every day instead of preventing illegal entry, choosing to process benefits for these migrants instead of for citizens and legal immigrant applications, choosing to flood the immigration courts with long-shot asylum cases, choosing to leave ICE detention beds empty rather than allow ICE to do its job, choosing to abandon worksite enforcement. Reversing these choices would bring about an end to the crisis and restore America's faith in our legal immigration system. That also needs some reform, but we simply don't have the ability to have a discussion about that until this other crisis is solved.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughan. Professor Wong?
Thank you, Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Graham, for the opportunity to testify today about the positive impact that providing a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers can have on American society and the economy. My name is Tom Wong, and I'm an Associate Professor of Political Science and Founding Director of the U.S. Immigration Policy Center at UC San Diego. I'm an expert on immigration politics and policies and have published multiple books and dozens of articles and policy reports on these topics. A pathway to citizenship for Dreamers will significantly improve the American economy. Undocumented young people already contribute to the economy by paying taxes. A pathway to citizenship would allow undocumented young people to participate more fully and more productively in the labor force. More specifically, a pathway to citizenship would increase employment among undocumented young people from an estimated 40% to over 90%. These employment gains would also be met with wage gains, which accrue to undocumented young people as they are able to adjust their immigration status. Altogether, these employment and wage gains suggest that a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers would add $2.5 billion per year in additional state and local tax revenue. This is a conservative estimate, as new research on DACA recipients, including my own, shows that the economic impact of DACA has outperformed most economic models. Another estimate shows that a pathway to citizenship for undocumented young people could lead to an estimated $799 billion increase in gross domestic product over a decade. More generally, a recent Congressional Budget Office estimate projects that immigrant workers will add an additional $7 trillion to the U.S. economy over the next decade and an extra $1 trillion in federal tax revenue. So DACA shows us how providing permanent protections to undocumented young people can benefit American society and the economy more generally. DACA has been one of the most successful immigrant integration policies that the U.S. has ever seen. I've researched the impact of DACA since its creation. Work authorization has allowed DACA recipients to participate more fully and more productively in the labor force. For example, approximately 59% of the DACA recipients that we recently surveyed reported moving to a job with better pay because of DACA. Approximately 47% reported moving to a job with better working conditions. Approximately 48% reported moving to a job that, quote, better fits their education and training. Approximately 50% reported moving to a job that, quote, better fits their long-term career goals. Approximately 20% reported that they obtained professional licenses, and approximately 10% reported that DACA allowed them to start their own businesses. Importantly, as the country grappled with the global pandemic, an estimated 343,000 DACA recipients worked in jobs that were deemed essential by the Department of Homeland Security. Moreover, nearly a decade of surveying DACA recipients has shown that DACA has had a significant and positive effect on wages. Because of DACA, average hourly wages have more than doubled from $11.92 to $31.52 per hour, an increase of 164%. Increased wages are beneficial for recipients, their families, and the U.S. economy. With higher earnings, DACA recipients pay more in taxes and are able to spend more. In 2022, DACA recipients earned an estimated $27.9 billion in wages and contributed nearly $2.1 billion to Social Security and Medicare. Moreover, in 2021, DACA recipients paid an estimated $6.2 billion in federal taxes and $3.3 billion in state and local taxes. But the legal attacks on DACA mean that the futures and the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people are uncertain. Without DACA, approximately 58% of the DACA recipients that we recently surveyed reported that they would be less likely to continue their education, and approximately 63% reported that they would be less likely to pursue new educational opportunities. Among DACA recipients who are parents, approximately 71% reported that they think about, quote, being separated from their children because of deportation at least once a day or more, and approximately 68% reported thinking about, quote, not being able to see their children grow up because of deportation at least once a day or more. Altogether, 9 out of every 10 DACA recipients reported concerns about their or their family's physical safety, ability to access health care or education, the risk of food insecurity, or the risk of homelessness if they no longer had DACA and were deported. Dreamers need permanent protections so that their immigration success stories can continue. Without permanent protections, not only will their American dreams end, but American society and the economy would be worse off if we turned our backs on this cohort of young people who are American in every sense of the word except on paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wong. Ms. Nobles?
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Tammy Nobles, and I am the mother of Kayla Hamilton. July 24, 2002 was one of the best days of my life. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl and named her Kayla Marie. She loved to laugh and smile. She treasured her friends and family and never forgot anyone. She was kind, caring, thoughtful, funny, and human. She loved life and God. But sadly, on July 27th, 2022, I received the worst news that a parent doesn't want to hear, that my newly 20-year-old daughter, Kayla Hamilton, was murdered in her own room and left on the floor like trash. At the end of March of 2022, Kayla's murderer was apprehended at the border, crossing illegally into the U.S. at the Southwood border in Rio Grande City, Texas. He was a 16-year-old known gang member affiliated with MS-13 in El Salvador. He entered the country as an unoccupied alien child and told Homeland Security that he was in fear of his life because of the gang activity in El Salvador. Department of Homeland Security did not check his body or make that one phone call to El Salvador to check his background. Department of Health and Human Services did not verify the sponsor before allowing him into the U.S. As a UAC, the murderer was allowed to go live with this unverified sponsor who lived in Frederick, Maryland. There were behavioral issues with him living with his sponsor, so he was freely allowed to go live with his half-brother who lived in the same neighborhood as Kayla and her boyfriend. A short time later, behavioral issues started again, and the half-brother did not want him living there. The half-brother called the leasing office, who were also the owners of the many mobile homes in the neighborhood, if she had any rooms for rent. Sadly, she allowed this underage MS-13 gang member to rent a room in the same mobile home as Kayla and her boyfriend, along with another family. Kayla's murderer was living there less than 5 days before he viciously murdered my daughter. Kayla had autism, but she was determined to live independently and make her way in this world. And my baby paid the ultimate price. She's just gotten off work at the night shift. She kissed her boyfriend goodbye that morning, and she went to sleep. The murderer broke into Kayla's room, scaring her. Kayla grabbed her phone and called her boyfriend, but went to voicemail. The murderer grabbed her iPod charger and wrapped it tightly around her throat and face while strangling her to death. The voicemail of the murderer strangling Kayla was 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. The murderer then violently sexually assaulted Kayla and just left her on the floor. After he committed the crime, he went to lunch with his half-brother like nothing happened. Kayla's boyfriend came home and found her dead on the floor with a charger cord was so tightly wrapped around her neck and face, he had to use his teeth to get it off. Local police didn't have enough evidence to arrest him, so they called ICE to ask if they could hold him until the DNA results came back because of the flight risk. ICE refused. So the Aberdeen Police Department had no choice but to call Child Protective Services, and they have asked Child Protective Services to put him in a secured location. It was later found out that Child Protective Services put him in an unsecured location in a children's home with other children, knowing of the violent crime that he committed. How many youths were let in that were just like Kayla's murderer? With the failed and neglected vetting and background checks, we have no idea who we are allowing in. Not all are innocent children and seeking the American dream. Some are criminals and are here to destroy American lives. For me, this is not a political issue. This is safety issues for everyone living in the United States. This could have been anyone's daughter. I don't want any other parent to live the nightmare that I am living. I am her voice now, and I'm going to fight with everything I have to get her story told and to bring awareness of the issues at the border. If we had stricter border policies, my daughter would still be alive today. Nothing will bring back my daughter nor fix the pain of not having her here. But I want to prevent this from happening to someone else's child. This isn't about immigration, this is about protecting everyone here in the United States.
Thank you, Ms. Noble.
Thank you.
Sorry for the loss of your daughter. Ms. Pacheco.
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and esteemed members of this committee, the last time I stood before this committee was over a decade ago. A decade. 10 years ago, I was undocumented and had just received DACA. Today, I stand before you as a proud, naturalized United States citizen, representing not just my own journey, but the hopes and aspiration of millions like me. Dreamers who, despite the challenges we face, continue to believe in the America's promise. As a dreamer who came to this country at the age of 8, I never imagined I would have had the opportunity to stand here as a citizen of the United States. It was through perseverance, determination, and marrying my college sweetheart that I was able to navigate the complex path to citizenship. A 10-year journey marked by uncertainty, but also by hope and resilience. I will never forget the day of my citizenship ceremony, standing alongside 60 immigrants from 21 countries, reciting the oath of allegiance with tears in my eyes, knowing that I was finally recognized as a fellow American. It was a moment of profound gratitude and humility, a testament to the enduring spirit of justice and opportunity of this nation. Yet amidst this appreciation was my humble recognition of how lucky I was. For the vast majority of dreamers in America, they don't have a similar opportunity. As the president and CEO of the Dream.US, the nation's largest college and career success scholarship program for dreamers, I've had the privilege of witnessing the transformative power of education, helping over 10,000 of our scholars access higher education. More than 4,000 of our scholars are now college graduates, and 94% of those with DACA and TPS are working. 2/3 are in business, health and medicine, and education. They are the embodiment of the American dream. The average age of arrival among the Dream.US scholar is just 4 years old. They did their entire schooling here and graduated from our schools. And yet their futures hang in the balance, their dreams deferred by political gridlock and bureaucratic inertia. The over 800 dreamers who benefited from DACA wasted no time in seizing the opportunity this program gave them. They went to college, joined the military, and in 2020 became essential workers in the front lines of our country's COVID-19 response. Unfortunately, for dreamers with and without DACA, their future remains uncertain. Those with DACA, their dreams are overshadowed by the fear of the legal challenges to the program. And those without DACA feel anguished by the inability to even apply. This academic year, we welcome our largest ever cohort of new Dream.US scholars. 3/4 of them lack DACA status. This is not just a policy issue. This is a profound moral test of whether we hold true to the ideals we so proudly proclaim. It is about the kind of nation we want to be, one that empowers the best and the brightest within its nation, or one that squanders potential in favor of inaction. A decade has passed since I last stood here before this committee, and yet the urgency of this moment has only grown. Senator Durbin, Senator Graham, bless you both for your unwavering commitment to the bipartisan dream solutions. Let us honor the legacy of those who came before us. Senator Orrin Hatch, Senator John McCain, Senator Richard Lugar, Senator Harry Reid, and so many others by finally passing bipartisan dream legislation. As I once walked 1,500 miles from Miami to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate not just my dedication, but the love I have for this country. Today, I stand before you, asking you to walk alongside us in a journey towards fairness and recognition. Let us not wait for history to judge our actions, but let us be the leaders who pave the way for a brighter future. I urge you with the utmost respect and urgency to pass legislation that aligns with our American ideals. For teachers, nurses, police officers, for all of them, to fully contribute to the nation we all dearly love and to which we belong, not just with our taxes and labor, but as recognized, respected, and legal Americans.
Thank you, Ms. Pacheco. I thank the members of the panel for holding to the 5-minute rule. I hope the senators will as well. We'll now go to questions and I'll start. Ms. Soto-Rodriguez, you were brought to the United States from Mexico by your parents at the age of 9?
That's correct.
I'm sure.
That's correct.
All right. Do you remember that decision by your family?
No, I was told by my family that's the decision they made.
And when you went to college at Moraine Valley, as well as, was Governor State or Lewis?
I first attended Moraine Valley, and then I got a scholarship for Lewis University, and then I had to leave Lewis due to economically, and then I attended Governor State.
And were you eligible for Pell Grants or federal assistance in your education?
No.
How did you pay for it?
I had to work 2 jobs. As soon as I left high school, I knew that I needed to help out to continue my education, so I paid out of my pocket.
And when DACA was created, you applied from the start?
That's correct.
Tell me what kind of background check you faced under DACA.
I had to go do my fingerprints, just like any other background check that they do. I had to complete an application, pay the fees, and I wait for my appointment for my fingerprints.
And each year when you renew, or each 2 years when you renew your DACA, are you checked again?
Yes.
And did you go through background checks to be on the police department of Blue Island?
That's correct. Twice.
Twice. And so let me ask you this, if you can address it. Do we have any shortages of law enforcement personnel in this country that you know of?
That's correct.
What have you seen?
Not many people want to work in law enforcement, but that's all I can tell you. Yeah, right now.
All right. Well, I've been told by police departments across our state that they're struggling to get recruits, and I think that's the case. And so, if some of the witnesses who testify want to eliminate the DACA program, what's going to happen to you?
I will lose my job, the job that I have fought so much for it. And also I will lose, probably even my home. And I won't be able to support my family financially.
Ms. Vaughan, I'd like to ask you a question. Your seatmate there has told a pretty compelling story about what she's done, the sacrifices she's made to be a law enforcement official. Do you really think America would be a better country if she were deported?
No, I don't.
Neither do I. Mr. Wong, Professor Wong, when it comes to the economic impact of the DACA program, we know that there are people eligible under the original program to apply for DACA, but who've been unable to because of a court decision. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Have you projected if all eligible DACA individuals were part of the economy, how that would change your numbers on the impact?
Yeah, so currently we estimate that all Dreamers, so DACA recipients as well as those that were excluded from DACA, contribute an estimated $45 billion each year to the economy in their wages and a combined $13 billion in taxes.
Do they make contributions to Social Security and Medicare?
Yes, a 2022 estimate suggests that at least DACA recipients contributed over $2 billion to Social Security and Medicare.
And that helps the program remain liquid and keep its obligations to American citizens?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's certainly obvious. Ms. Pacheco, I remember when I first met you. You just finished walking from Miami. That's hard to forget. You've been through this struggle for many years and been through it personally. Congratulations on being a new citizen of this country.
Thank you.
What message would you give to those who believe that the failures and crisis at the border should be held against those who are eligible for DACA?
We cannot wait. We can do both things at once. I was there in 2018. I was devastated when I heard President Trump tell the senators that we shouldn't do a border dreamer amendment. We have had this issue for 20-some years. We need to do something now.
Thank you very much. Senator Gray.
Thank you, Ms. Pacheco. I appreciate you coming, and we'll keep pushing here. Are you concerned that if we pass DACA tomorrow, it would incentivize more illegal immigration?
I'm not. It did not happen in 2020.
That's fair. Ms. Vaughan, are you?
Yes, I am, because we do know from experience that when Congress is talking about enacting an amnesty, when there's this general discussion
It goes around the world.
It goes around the world. I mean,
Okay.
look how many people know our policies.
I got you. How many children 4 years old have come to the country in the last 3 years, Mr. Wong, illegally, brought by their parents?
There are approximately 600,000 undocumented young people under the age of 18, and
In the last 3 years?
No, under 18, and a small percentage of those.
No, I'm asking you, how many people under 18 have been brought to the United States by their parents in the last 3 years?
Based on ACS projections, we can guess approximately 60,000.
60,000?
Yes.
Of the 9 or 10 million?
No,
Are
60,000.
minors.
So based on ACS data, so this is excluding those encounters.
So how many unaccompanied minors have we had in this country in the last 3 years?
I do not know.
Was it 400,000, John? What was it? Unaccompanied minors. 400,000. Ms. Nobles, the man accused of killing your daughter, was he an unaccompanied minor?
Yes, he was.
Would we all agree America would have been better off if he had not been allowed to come here?
Kayla
I'll
would
just
have been
assume
better off.
everybody says yes. So they indicted this man today. He's innocent till proven guilty. This is Mr. Ibarra. He was paroled into the country along with millions of other people, but he is paroled due to detention capacity at the Central Processing Center in El Paso. That's the man facing murder charges of Ms. Laken Riley. He was just waived into the country. You went through a lot, Ms. Rodriguez. You have a lot to be proud of. We check who you are, and you made a lot out of your life here. Nobody even gave this guy the time of day. So, Gaby, I admire you very much, but I am completely convinced if we gave legalization to anybody until we stop this stuff, we're just going to be overrun. And, here's the dilemma. You have very bright, hardworking people that I want to help that have been here for years. But now you've got tens of thousands of new 3, 4, 9-year-olds. Are they going to get DACA too? Mr. Wong, anybody that's been here for the last 3 years as a 4-year-old, they're 7 now, should they be allowed to be considered DACA of the future?
DACA had residency requirements to explicitly address that potential pull.
So would you recommend we tell them they can't stay?
So that's what we have done historically. So with DACA,
so it's okay to tell
recently,
these 4 and 9-year-olds you can't stay.
Well, so I didn't make DACA, but DACA did not allow individuals who recently arrived to enroll
So
in the
I guess my
program.
point is, where does it stop? There'll be a group, very sharp 9-year-old child that's been here 3 years, and 3 will turn into 5, and 5 will turn into 10, and we'll have this all over again. It's not that I don't want to help. I just want to do anything that's going to throw gasoline on a fire. We've had almost over 2 million people paroled. I just want to let people know that if President Trump wins, I predict, I'm not going to speak for him, but unless you really, truly have a unique benefit to the country or a unusual humanitarian situation, you're going to be kicked out. There are millions of people here who have just been waved into the country. They don't, Ms. Vaughan, has the parole statute been abused?
Yes, it has been.
Yeah. So you're talking about trying to help people that are deserving, and you just can't convince me that it's not going to lead to a bigger run on the border. And the biggest fear I have right now is that if we don't get control over the parole system, the unaccompanied minor system, the stories of Lincoln Riley and Miss Nobles are just going to grow and grow and grow. And Mr. Chairman, I have been sitting, Gutierrez, we sit at a table, and I've been pushing back, and I'll end. I never dreamed it would get this bad, and to expect me or anybody else to engage in legalization in the middle of a complete chaos is just a bridge too far.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had many hearings relating to the need for comprehensive immigration reform, and I want to acknowledge the work that Senators Graham and the chairman of this committee worked together in 2013 when we did deal with comprehensive immigration reform. So we all understand how complex our immigration system is, and that it is broken. So it is not just a matter of we need to help the DACA recipients, the dreamers, and all of the other issues that have been brought this morning. We acknowledge the need. I acknowledge the need for comprehensive immigration reform. At the same time, we have millions, literally over 1 million dreamers. We had at one time 800,000 DACA participants or recipients. We have maybe about 500,000 of them now, and DACA has had an impact in every state in the country, including Hawaii. We have 320 active DACA recipients in Hawaii, and frankly, at a time when just about every industry, every organization, including the police departments across our country, are in need of workers, it makes little sense to me that we are not going to enact legislation that is going to enable the DACA recipients to stay in our country and not get, and they're all, I would say most of them are working and contributing to our economy clearly, as Professor Wong has pointed out. So it makes little sense to me that we are going to subject these hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients and dreamers to deportation. Let me get back to Stephanie. Stephanie moved to the U.S. when she was 3 and grew up in Lahaina, Maui. She graduated from the University of Hawaii with an undergraduate degree, and she went on to get a law degree from the University of Hawaii's Richardson School of Law. She is now clerking for our Hawaii First Circuit judge, and she hopes to work in immigration law because she has seen the unfortunate reality of our nation's broken immigration system. Stephanie's story is inspiring, but not unique. Between 2013 and 2022, DACA recipients like Stephanie paid $84 million in federal taxes and $41 million in state and local taxes. And if we give DACA or dreamers a pathway to citizenship, in Hawaii alone, they could earn $1.6 billion in wages while contributing hundreds of millions in taxes in the next 10 years. Clearly, they have a huge economic impact in our country. They have paid their fair share, they have helped their economy grow, and they have enriched our communities. And it's, of course, past time that we, once again, as we did in 2013 when so many of us, I certainly worked on the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill in 2013 when so many of us worked on supporting DACA participants. So it's time we did that. Do have a question for Ms. Pacheco. Thank you very much for your perseverance. Growing up as an immigrant, I too grew up in a situation where I didn't have health insurance. My greatest fear was my mother would get sick and therefore would not go to work, be able to go to work. And no work is, you don't have money to pay the rent or put food on the table. So having health insurance, I realize, is a critical part of enabling all of us to have a stable life. So the Biden administration has a rule, or is putting forth a rule that would enable DACA recipients to be able to participate in obtaining health insurance. Can you talk a little bit about how having health insurance really was a hugely critical thing for you?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. When I was able to get DACA, I got employed and was able to get health insurance. And during a routine checkup, I actually was detected that I had cancer. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I was able to get treatment. Unfortunately, that treatment left me with a lot of complications today that unfortunately I cannot get pregnant. I believe that if I would have had healthcare beforehand and we would have detected it earlier, I would be in a different situation today.
Professor Wong, you have a lot of statistics about the economic impact of DACA and enabling the many dreamers to participate in our economy. And would you agree that providing these people healthcare is a critical part of enabling them to stay in the workforce and to have stable family and lives?
Yes, absolutely.
So of course you would support the Biden administration's rule that would enable them to participate in healthcare.
Yes, what we find is approximately 1/4 of DACA recipients currently do not have any kind of health insurance coverage. So coverage through the ACA would significantly benefit DACA recipients.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rono, Senator Cornyn.
Ms. Vaughan, can you help me confirm my memory, which is that back when President Obama talked about the Dreamers, that he acknowledged repeatedly that he did not have the legal authority to do what he ultimately did. Is that your recollection as well?
Yes, it is, and yes.
And so now we find that federal judges, both in Houston and the Fifth Circuit, have agreed with President Obama that he did not have the authority to provide this deferred action on childhood arrivals, correct?
That's right, and a federal judge in Dallas as well, even before those cases.
And so here we are 12 years after the fact when President Obama said he didn't have the authority to do this, and now these federal judges have said, yes, you're right, you didn't have that authority. And we are, these young people who admittedly came here as children through no fault of their own find themselves in legal limbo, correct?
Correct.
So just to correct the record also, Senator Durbin said that I never voted for any bill that provided for relief for Dreamers. I would point him to the Secure and Succeed Act, which I voted for in 2018. It was in the context of a much larger comprehensive immigration reform bill. But we find the situation much different today with the border on fire. I want to follow up a little more with you, Ms. Vaughan, about what the Border Patrol has always told me, that the things you need to keep in mind is that there are push factors and pull factors, or I should say push factors and pull factors. So Senator Durbin said the fact we're America, that's a pull factor. And I would agree with him. Everybody wants to come to the United States. Who wouldn't? But the only way we've been able to deal with this on a legal, orderly, and humane system is through a legal immigration system, correct?
Correct, yes.
But the people who look to exploit our vulnerabilities when it comes to the border and our immigration system, like the criminal organizations that basically fly people from all around the world for money to show up at our border and claim asylum or parole, they see the policies of the current administration as an enormous opportunity to make a lot of money, and the migrants who take advantage of that are seeing an enormous pull factor or magnet to come to the United States, correct?
That's right. A lot of the migrants themselves refer to it as Biden's invitation.
So what's the effect of, if Congress were today didn't do anything else but passed the Durbin bill relating to Dreamers, we didn't do anything else, would that be an additional pull factor?
Most definitely. people would be inspired to turn themselves over to criminal smuggling organizations to try to get here to benefit from that.
And Ms. Pacheco, congratulations on navigating the maze of our immigration laws and becoming a naturalized citizen. That's what we should want for everybody to come through legal means. But Senator Durbin's bill, his DREAM Act bill, it draws a line at people who came after or more recently than 4 years. In other words, it addresses people more than 4 years before enactment. So what do we do with those who've come more recently?
Senator, we work on the DREAM Act and then work on a comprehensive immigration reform that brings our antiquated, broken immigration system into existence that we don't have today.
Well, you know as well as I know that we have never failed to fail when it comes to comprehensive immigration reform. The whole time I've been here in the Senate, we've talked about it. It's like a unicorn. People claim it exists, but nobody's ever seen it. And that is a tragedy for everybody involved and for the rest of the country too. But if we leave out some of the people who would otherwise qualify because of Senator Durbin's bill, that's okay with you or not?
I believe in this body, and I believe that this body will be fair and will be able to find the laws and the right policies to include as many people as possible.
Thank you. My time's up.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Senator Durbin. And I wanted to clarify, I guess, with you, Professor Wong, one more thing. When we're talking about dreamers and people with temporary status, TPS, and deferred enforced departure, are we talking about people seeking asylum at the southern border right now?
No, we're not.
Okay, and what in fact are we talking about?
We are talking about people who are currently in the country, who have grown up in this country, who have known nothing but this country. The DREAM Act population is distinct from the flows that we're seeing at the southern border.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would start with you, Ms. Pacheco. Thank you so much for your testimony. I just want to use one example from my state. Carlos, he was brought to the U.S. when he was 7 months old, and he discovered when he was 11 that he was undocumented. And in high school, he received numerous awards for academic excellence. He was captain of the varsity soccer team. He earned a scholarship. He attended Carleton College in Minnesota. He was granted DACA status, and today he works at a law firm. Stories like his are why I support a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. They know no other country. Can you talk about why this pathway is so critical?
Well, it's critical not just for the DACA recipients and those that are fully undocumented for the dreamers, but it's also critical for our country. Today, we have teachers, nurses, doctors, you name it, working and supporting in our economy. What would it be if we were to lose DACA in the middle of the school year and an elementary school teacher has to leave her classroom? That would be a detriment not only to her, but her children and the whole entire community that depends on her to educate those kids.
Okay, and then I guess one example, since you brought up police officers. Officer, I want to thank you for your service. You've been here for 20 years. Next week is Police Week, when we honor you and others who serve in uniform. You testified that if DACA were to end, your career in law enforcement would end. I'm well aware, carrying the cops bill, how much of a shortage we have right now in officers. Beyond your service, there's just a shortage in retaining and in getting officers and keeping them in the field. What has it been like to live with this uncertainty professionally, and talk about why you chose law enforcement when you could choose many other careers?
Like I mentioned in my story, everything happened that day of the car accident when I was with my mom and my other sister, there were another vehicle struck us while we were driving. The way the officer explained to us everything and he talked to us, he could just be like, I'm not gonna help you and just don't explain anything. And by the fact that he knew that my mother did not speak English and my English wasn't very well, he decided to start speaking Spanish to us. So by seeing that, that's what encouraged me to be like, I want to be able to do the same. I want to be able to help my community that I grew up with and help the rest of the people here. So that's why I chose to become a police officer.
Did you ever meet that officer again and tell him that he was your inspiration?
I have not seen him, but the day that comes, hopefully one day, I get to see him again and I can let him know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Wong, in your testimony, you talk about the economic impact of Dreamers. One estimate, Dreamers contribute an estimated $45 billion to the U.S. economy, and through their wages, and pay $13 billion annually in taxes. You testified that with a pathway to citizenship, Dreamers would add $2.5 billion per year in additional state and local tax revenue. Explain that and what these economic consequences are.
Yeah, that 2.5 billion number is actually a conservative estimate. So it assumes an 8.5% increase in wages post legalization. So when we're thinking about projecting economic benefits, we are thinking about what life is like economically for an undocumented person versus somebody who has legal status and can fully participate in the economy. So that $2.5 billion additional revenue per year is a conservative estimate because that 8.5% is on the very low end of what we've seen DACA recipients produce. We actually see that DACA recipients have increased wages up to 164%. So that means that the projected increase in revenue could be significantly higher than existing economic projections.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Nobles, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm a strong supporter of more security at the border and hoping we can merge some of these issues and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I'd like to clarify one thing that is raised by Senator Cornyn about the effective date of those arrival in this country and eligibility. I introduced the original DREAM Act along with Senator Hatch. We have changed the date of eligibility in various versions of the bill over the years. It never stayed at the same starting dates. So it's subject to change if it is considered, and I hope it will be, by this committee and by the Senate and House of Representatives. But today we're also discussing DACA, and I want to make a point of the record. DACA applies only to immigrants who entered before their 16th birthdays and who lived in the country continuously since at least June 15th, 2007, more than a decade ago. No one entering now or any entered in the last decade would be eligible for DACA as we're talking about it. So if we extend and legalize DACA, that's the standard that's being used at this point. Senator Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all members of our panel for being here today. Ms. Nobles, I'm sorry. I don't have a daughter, I have a son. If what happened to your daughter happened to my son, I don't know if I could ever recover. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. I'm just sorry. I don't know anybody in the United States Senate who has worked harder to implement and control, well, let me amend that, to implement an immigration policy that looks like somebody designed it on purpose than Senator John Cornyn. The problem we've had in the last 3 years is that except until recently, when it became a political issue, President Biden just didn't care. And sometimes when a person acts like he doesn't care, it's not an act. And that's why we have way more, Professor Wong, than 60,000 minors, many of whom are being trafficked, sexually trafficked today in our country. And I suspect you know that. Professor Wong, you're a professor from California, is that right?
Yes.
And you were invited here as an expert today by our Democratic colleagues?
Yes.
Okay. You're on the board of directors of the California Immigrant Policy Center. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And I'm looking at your website. You and the center believe, I want to quote, if that's okay. According to you and the center, quote, the immigration enforcement system is built on white supremacy, economic exploitation, and criminalization, and must be dismantled, end quote. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that statement.
Here it is, right from your website, and you're on the board of directors. Do you believe that our immigration system is built on white supremacy?
No, sir.
Well, you said it, Professor. Now, did you lie here, or are you lying to us today?
No, I did not write that statement. I'm on the board of directors of an organization called the California Immigrant Policy Center that advocates for legislative changes in the state of California to improve the lives of immigrants. I'm not aware of that statement.
Well, you ought to go look at your website.
Are you talking about my personal website?
I'm not talking about the California Immigrant Policy Center.
Yes, I'm not aware of that statement on the
board
California Immigrant Policy Center's website.
That the immigration enforcement system in America today is, quote, built on white supremacy.
That's not my statement.
Yes, it is.
That's not my statement.
You're on the board. It's built on economic exploitation, and it's built on criminalization, and it must be dismantled. You also say, you in the center, that you want to, quote, strategically push ICE out of our communities across California, end quote. Wow.
So an extensive body of research shows that interior immigration enforcement, to the extent that ICE partners with local police, has chilling effects across immigrant communities and their families.
Did you listen to Ms. Noble's testimony?
Yes, I did, with great concern.
Yeah. You think getting rid of ICE is gonna help young women not be raped and murdered by MS-13 gang members? Is that your answer to
No, that's
bringing
not.
justice to Mrs. Noble's daughter? Is to call her a white supremacist and say that she believes in economically exploiting people?
No, that's not. You are attributing a statement to me that I did not make.
Yes, sir, you did. It's on your website.
Time has expired, Senator. I think it's inappropriate to call people liars in this hearing. I hope that we'll be very careful. The witnesses are under oath, and to say that they are lying is to accuse them of something close to a crime. And I think that term should be carefully used.
Well, can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
When you get I'm going to recognize Senator Blackburn because I should have recognized her before you, and she has to go. and we have several others waiting. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have an honor flight of veterans from Tennessee that are waiting for us at the memorial. Thank you for the hearing today, and to each of you for being here. Thank you for your time and your testimony. And Ms. Nobles, we're so grateful that you would be here. I know this is painful, and I appreciate that you are here. Mr. Chairman, I do wish that since H.R. 2, the border security bill from the House has been over here now right at a year, and we have not taken that bill up. I do wish that we would take that bill up so that we could stem the flow of illegal immigration coming into this country and then address some of these issues. I know that Senator Cornyn and Senator Graham talked a little bit about things that have been offered before. I know that President Trump, and recall that he had tried to get Speaker Pelosi at that time to work with him on a way to permanent residency for DACA enrollees, and that offer was rejected. But securing that border is important, and I was concerned about President Biden's announcement that he was going to offer Obamacare to everybody that is in the DACA program. Now, at this point, we have 85,000 illegal migrant children that HHS and the Office of Refugee Resettlement cannot find. They do not know where they are. They don't know if they are dead or alive. They don't know what has happened to these children. I've constantly asked Secretary Becerra about this, Secretary Mayorkas. They cannot find these children. They're not putting energy into that, but they think the right thing to do is go say, oh, let's give free health care, and then leave the border open, not secure the border, and ask the American taxpayer to pay for this when unemployment is at a 2-year high. Foreign-born workers are coming into the workforce. Taxpayers are struggling to make ends meet, but you want to talk about raising taxes and paying for a new program when you cannot manage what is in front of you. And fixing this issue at the southern border should be what we are talking about and what we commit to doing. Nearly 10 million in 3 years that have illegally crossed the border. Ms. Vaughan, let me come to you. When we talk about this new rule that would give health care, and we look at what is happening at the southern border, would the implementation of this new rule of free health care to all DACA enrollees, would that serve as a message that incentivizes illegal crossings into this country? How do you read that?
Well, I think my understanding of the rule is that it allows people with DACA who qualify based on incomes to access the subsidies of Obamacare, and extending benefits like this, taxpayer funded benefits to this, sends a signal that the United States is not serious about enforcing its immigration laws, that if people can just get here and stay long enough, they will eventually be offered these kinds of benefits.
Yeah, let me ask you about the parole program. You touched on that briefly. And I know that under President Obama and President Trump, that they each paroled about 5,600 individuals per year into the country. But in 2022, President Biden paroled 800,000 people into the country. And then in 23, he paroled 1.2 million people. I mean, look at the orders of magnitude of the actions that Biden has had, and has selected this niche program of parole status. So in my mind, this is abusing that parole program. I'd like for you to touch on that and how that affects the southern border.
Well, it makes a mockery of this discretionary authority that Congress gave the president with the intent that it would be used for specific purposes for inadmissible aliens, people who would not otherwise be allowed to come in, for either a significant public benefit or an urgent humanitarian need. And with the understanding that the numbers would be very small, and it would not be used in a categorical way or casually as it has been. In some of the historical cases, it was used in situations where Congress was about to validate these grants of benefits, and that is certainly not the case with people coming here illegally. And we know from talking to the migrants themselves that they understand that if they can make it to the border, if they can make a down payment in their on their smuggling fee, that it's very likely that they will be allowed to stay here indefinitely without any fear of enforcement within the country, whether they show up for their immigration proceedings or not, and potentially have access to the same kind of benefits that are given to long-term people who've been here illegally.
I want to clarify something. The health benefits offered by the Biden administration is to DACA. In other words, to be eligible, you have to have lived continuously in the United States since June of 2007. 17 years of residence. This notion of people perched at the border jumping across because they just heard about the health care benefits bears no relation to the reality of the law that was enacted or the order that was issued by the president. Senator Coons.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham. And Chair Durbin, if I could, just before I proceed, you are a good and decent man. And one of the strongest impressions I've had of you is when I first came here 14 years ago and was presiding and got to hear you deliver a speech about Dreamers on the floor. It's one of the first things that happened after I got elected. And your passion, your engagement, your determination to find a way forward here has inspired me and has challenged all of us. And your bipartisan work with Senator Graham, Senator Hatch, and others is a monument to persistence in the pursuit of justice. Thank you. And I'd like to thank our witnesses today for appearing before us and for testifying. To Officer Soto-Rodriguez, thank you for your service and your willingness to share your story today. And to Ms. Nobles, I'm a parent too, and I cannot imagine the depths of your suffering and agony, and I just wanted to convey my sympathies for your unspeakable loss. And I think it's important today when we talk about security and the border and law enforcement and Dreamers and DACA and the path forward that we have in our minds examples that are positive as well as a clear-eyed look at the record. I wanted to lift up today a Delawarean, Maria Cervantes Garcia. I first met Maria at Delaware State University. I've recently interacted with her because she's a chemist. I trained as a chemist. I wasn't a very good one. She trained as a chemist. She's a very good one. She today works for a company, Comores, as an analytical chemist. I think, yes, there's a wonderful photo behind me of Maria at graduation. With a scholarship from the Dream.us, Maria was able to channel her natural aptitude for math and science at Delaware State University to a degree in chemistry. And she loves volunteering at Aspire Academy. She's been a coach and STEM ambassador for the Science Olympiad. Like every other dreamer, she is so much more than her immigration status. And so while we have this conversation about the DREAM Act that the chairman has introduced every Congress since 2001, it's important to also remind people what we're talking about is folks who are neighbors and friends who have real lives. They, like Maria, she is someone who likes going for a walk in Glasgow Park, has friends, is a member of our community, is contributing to our society in a very positive way. There's long been bipartisan recognition that we should act to address the status situation of people like Maria. We do need to address security at our border, which is why I supported the bipartisan border security agreement. But we can't forget about people whose status hangs in the balance and who are participating in the DACA program. I also briefly, if I might, Mr. Chairman, wanted to recognize the bipartisan introduction in the House of the Dignity Act by Representative Salazar and Escobar that recognizes the need to address both of these issues, physical security at the border and a path forward that provides for dignity. Let me ask two questions, if I might. Officer Soto-Rodriguez, I'm interested in your perspectives as a DACA recipient and a member of law enforcement. What's your reaction to those who talk about the border and public safety as a reason not to provide a path to citizenship for dreamers such as yourself?
Do you mind rephrasing the question or shorter, like?
I'll put it differently. I'd like to believe you testified that you're a law enforcement officer because of an interaction you had with a kind officer.
Correct.
Are you hopeful that your presence on the force will help inspire others to join law enforcement?
Correct.
And is it your view that the issues at the border of safety and security and the issues of whether or not people who were brought here as children decades ago are different issues?
Correct.
Thank you. That was the simple point I wanted to make. Mr. Wong, if I might, in Delaware and in states across the country, we're dealing with big labor shortages. Can you just speak briefly to how fortifying DACA and passing the DREAM Act can help address significant labor shortages in the United States?
Yes, the DREAM Act would bring hundreds of thousands of undocumented young people out of the shadows and into the labor force. Legal status will allow them to work more fully and more productively. Importantly, legal status will allow individuals to work in jobs that are commensurate with their education and training. And so when we think about undocumented young people, many who don't have DACA are stuck in jobs that are far below what their ceiling is. And so providing a path to citizenship and legal status would allow these undocumented young people to meet their full potential, thereby addressing labor needs across the workforce.
Thank you, Professor. One of the reasons I lifted up Maria, again, I want to express my gratitude to the Dream.us for making it possible for her to graduate from Delaware State University. She's an example of what is possible, but we are currently missing out the skills and the opportunities of many who are here in this country who could and should be on a pathway to citizenship and fully contributing to our society. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Coons. Senator Hawley and Tillis, I want you to know I made a mistake earlier and didn't recognize Senator Blackburn in proper order. So I recognize Senator Kennedy and Blackburn. Now I'm going to recognize one more Democrat, and then we'll come back over. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor Wong, you testified today that providing a pathway to citizenship for dreamers would significantly improve the American economy, right? A lot of us spend a lot of time in trying to do morally the right thing when it comes to dreamers and their families, but you're making an economic argument that doing so could potentially bring in billions of dollars in additional state and local tax revenue, create new jobs, and lead to a nearly $800 billion increase in our GDP. From those figures alone, the economic argument in favor of legalization, I think, is not just clear, but very compelling. However, as you may know, former President Trump has said that should he be elected to a second term, he would target millions of undocumented immigrants in a massive deportation campaign that, if successful, I can tell you would not just terrorize communities and lead to separation of families, ripping countless people from the only homes they've ever known, but I think you have the expertise to talk about what an economic impact such a massive deportation campaign would have on regional economies and our nation's economy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Dreamers currently contribute an estimated $45 billion per year in gross domestic product. If we no longer had DACA and subjected Dreamers to that massive deportation force that you mentioned, then we would lose out on that economic benefit. But more to the point, DACA recipients and Dreamers more generally aren't just economic units. There are people who are embedded in our communities. And so in our most recent survey of DACA recipients, what we did was conduct a survey experiment to figure out what life without DACA would be like for DACA recipients. And so, as I mentioned earlier, approximately 58% would be less likely to pursue education without DACA. Approximately 63% would be less likely to pursue new educational opportunities. Importantly, 43% say they would be less likely to look for new jobs, and 42% would be less likely to report wage theft by their employers. And so not only would we lose the economic benefits that Dreamers currently bring to the economy, but we would put Dreamers further into the shadows to the point where even if they were being abused by their employers, they wouldn't report it.
Thank you. And just to underscore the significance of your response, I want to remind us all of the distinction again, because our colleagues on the other side of the aisle keep muddling the issue. I'm not talking about people who may be on their way to the southern border to seek asylum or anything else. We're talking about long-term current residents of the United States and their work and their contributions to the success of communities in our country. Now, as we've heard today, it's been more than 2 decades since the DREAM Act was first introduced. It was in 2001 that our chairman, Chairman Durbin, and the late Senator Orrin Hatch introduced the DREAM Act the first time. It's been bipartisan since day one. The chair's been fighting for it ever since, and during all this time, Dreamers have grown up. They've graduated high school, we've graduated from college, many from graduate school. They've started families, and those lucky enough to have the protections that come with DACA have established careers. They become doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers, like Officer Soto-Rodriguez, who's here with us today. But all that time, Dreamers have also lived with the uncertainty and fear because of their status. And Congress's failure year after year to deliver for them. I'd like to ask Ms. Pacheco, who you said in your testimony that you're here representing not only your own journey, which is a powerful and inspiring one in and of itself, but you also represent the hopes and aspirations of millions like you who have lived through the ups and downs of this fight for many, many years. Can you please tell us what these past few decades have been like for you and others who've been waiting and waiting and waiting far too long for protections and certainty?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Well, it's been 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats, in the last 20 years that we have seen this. And for me, the biggest devastation is seeing that today the average age of a DACA recipient is actually 29. They actually now have families. 1 in 10 of our scholars have a U.S. citizen child. They say that about 300,000 U.S. citizen children have a parent that has DACA. And for me, the thing that really hurts the most is seeing all the potential that the young people, many of them sitting in this room today, have and the desire to be able to contribute even more than they already are contributing to this country if they were to be allowed to be U.S. citizens.
Thank you. I have additional questions, but my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I've been in the Senate since 2015. I've been on Judiciary Committee since the beginning of that. I've sat through a hearing at least every Congress, and it's much of the same. We haven't done a damn thing. And a lot of that is because it is thorny, and people only want to listen to one side of the argument and not both sides of the argument. I have co-sponsored and supported efforts to have a path to citizenship for the DACA population. I also felt very strongly that we have to secure the border first. This administration, just a quick question, everybody just raise your hands if you agree. Do you believe that there are roughly 9 million encounters at the border since President Biden's been in office, some number less than that, are people who have ultimately made their way to this country? Do they deserve a path to citizenship? Let's call it 7 million who have crossed the border illegally since Biden came into office. Does anybody here think they deserve a path to citizenship? Okay, we have one in the audience. Do we believe that people that crossed the border illegally during the Trump administration deserve a path to citizenship? Okay. Do we believe that I think even the DACA legislation, I think the number is 2012, do we believe that anybody who's crossed the border since 2012 deserves a path to citizenship? Well, I have to, there's a difference here, because I'm assuming because y'all didn't raise your hand that we're back to the traditional definition of DACA or dreamer population. But guess what? If we don't have an answer for the unmanaged border, there's no earthly way that we're going to get a path to citizenship for a population that I've supported. I've taken all the hits for supporting path to citizenship. I support it for the reasons some of my colleagues across the aisle have. But I do believe, I think that the chair commented on, there is a huge pull factor. We're the United States of America. We're one of the greatest countries that's ever existed. Thanks for actually being willing to risk your life and risk the lives of your children for coming to this country. On the one hand, it's a great compliment. On the other hand, for somebody like me who's trying to get a path to citizenship and secure the border, stop it. Because every single person who crosses that border illegally puts me further away from getting a path to citizenship to the very people that those of you who are on the panel who support it want to have it. Stop it. Now we don't even have an administration. You know why the James Lankford bill imploded? A lot of good policy in it. Zero trust in the Biden administration for securing the border. Zero trust. And there's a good reason why. When you've got Democrat mayors saying we cannot handle the load that's coming on us because we're moving people off the border into New York and Chicago, when they have to experience the pain that Texas and some of the border states experience, guess what? They've been doing it for years. So we've created a problem that isn't going to get fixed until people who support a path to citizenship can finish the sentence by saying, and secure the border and stop the illegal crossings. And the people who say that we don't need foreign workers, that we don't need more people, I for one think we probably need about 500,000 more people a year to solve our demographic problem, to avoid what's happened in Japan and Western nations. But it's the people who say there's nothing to see here at the border, it's not a crisis, it's on you. Because until you recognize it is a problem, it is a crisis, you have to come here in an orderly fashion, you have to respect our laws. Don't let your first encounter with the United States of America be avoiding and ignoring our laws about legal immigration. Get frustrated. Advocate for more people coming across, but understand that's a problem, folks. Help me help you. If you want the dreamers to have certainty and have a path to citizenship, if you want the DACA population, as I do, to want certainty and have a path to citizenship, then stop trying to have it both ways. Because that is partisan, it's ideologically driven, and it will result in making these poor people that I am trying to get a path to citizenship further away from ever getting it. So stop talking past each other, stop only liking one side of the equation, stop pretending you like bipartisanship if in fact you won't support both sides of the equation. That is strong border policy, respect our laws, come here on an orderly basis, and then count me in for trying to get about 500,000 more into this country legally and doing something right for the DACA and Dreamer population. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this hearing. Thank you to our panel. Just want to remind everybody in the room and everyone tuned in that we're talking about folks who were brought here as children and have been part of our society for 20 years in many cases. Children who were brought to the United States through no fault of their own and who are actively contributing and law-abiding and, in many cases, law enforcement officers themselves. Neighbors and community members. And in Georgia, we host and are proud to be the home of more than 17,000 active DACA recipients, folks who were brought here as children through no fault of their own and have participated in this program established with bipartisan support. It's something that's surprised me about the way this hearing has gone so far, Mr. Chairman, is this has for so long been a common sense, bipartisan question of basic fairness. And I hope that we can return to that spirit as we approach this issue, because it is urgent, in my view, that we pass bipartisan legislation that establishes a path to citizenship for these Americans who were brought here as children and who otherwise follow the law. So I want to ask you, please, Ms. Soto-Rodriguez. In Georgia, in recent months, many DACA recipients have seen substantially increased delays in the processing time for renewals. My office has received calls from DACA recipients as well as their employers. Work permits depend upon the renewal of DACA authorization. So from your perspective, what are the most profound impacts on the daily lives of DACA recipients when they're unable to timely renew their status?
I can tell you from my experience, because I just went through it just this past renewal. I did my renewal with the time that they tell us to do it. I was about to lose my job because my work permit was about to expire within a day. When the expiration came in, my driver's license was already expired, so I had no driver's license, and I had to talk to my chief from the police department to let him know what was the issue. So it affected me. All these delays is affecting me, and also affecting all the DACAs as well.
How old were you when you were brought to the United States?
9 years old.
9 years old. You're now a patrol officer.
Correct.
Which department?
Blue Island Police Department.
And so the Blue Island Police Department, at a time when law enforcement organizations across the country are having a tough time hiring and retaining officers and deputies, stood potentially to lose a member of the force if your DACA renewal was not processed on time.
I mean, they were following just the rules, but they were able to help me too, because they knew that I was doing the right thing.
Sure.
By renewing my permit. It was just not my fault that my permit wasn't coming on time.
Ms. Soto-Rodriguez, what would be you've heard, there's been some theatrics at this hearing, and welcome to the United States Senate, but as you've heard all of the partisan speeches today and all the usual political talking points that people associate with Congress and see on TV, as someone who has lived the journey you have and who has achieved amazing things, and you're defending your community, you're enforcing the law with the Blue Island Police Department, what would be your message to senators up here who have been talking about this, the importance of establishing some stability, some permanency, about a path to citizenship for folks who were brought here as children, have been here for 20 years, have participated in the DACA program? What's your message to these politicians today?
Just like I mentioned in my story at the beginning, most of us come here because of our parents, and many of us are doing great things for the country, and especially because we don't see this country just as a country. Like, for me, this is my home. This is who I live, who I give my life for. So I wouldn't pick any other country. I know I'm Mexican, I know I wasn't born here, but this is my home. This is the only place I know since I was brought here.
Thank you, Ms. Soto-Rodriguez. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Ms. Pacheco, if I could just start with you. Your organization, the Dream.us, you provide support for undocumented young people for college and career success. Is that broadly right? Am I getting it right?
That's correct.
And among the things you do is you provide scholarships to these undocumented students. Have I got that correct?
That's right.
And so college scholarships, just to be clear.
Correct. Okay,
gotcha. Can you tell me, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, any of the students, do you know if any of the students to whom your organization has provided a college scholarship are currently part of the encampments on any of these college campuses, like the picture you see behind me. I'm sure we've all seen these videos.
No, Senator.
Nobody to whom you provide scholarships are part of the encampments?
I do not know.
Oh, you don't know. What about, do you know if any of the students to whom you provided scholarships have physically threatened Jewish students on campus?
I do not know.
Here's why I'm asking. NBC News just reported, and I'm just going to quote now from the article, quote, this is Columbia University, a Columbia undergraduate who provided only her initials because she is an undocumented immigrant and fears deportation, said last week she spent hours a day in the encampment. This would be the illegal encampment that's in violation of the law as well as campus policy. Spent hours a day in the encampment, I'm quoting still now, before university officials threatened to suspend those students. The article goes on, she joined, this student, joined a supplies platoon. That's a subgroup formed by pro-Palestinian campus organizers, end quote. Let me just review some of the things that these students, these in the encampments that is, are saying. Of course, we often don't know who these students are. They're concealing their identities. This is, I'm going to read to you now, and I just warn folks, this is not pleasant stuff, but these are the facts, and we have to tell the truth. This is just from last night at George Washington University. That's here in this town. They projected, the students in the encampment there projected onto various buildings images of the United States flag being burned with the graphics, Gaza lights the spark that will set the empire ablaze. They projected the following: long live the student intifada, down with the settler state, that would be the state of Israel, I suppose. Glory to the martyrs of Palestine, it's a jihadist slogan. Stained with the blood of 44,000 Palestinians. That's last night at GW. Also at GW, they're now calling for beheading, the student encampment, beheading of individuals who support the state of Israel, including holding a people's tribunal where they're putting on trial, quote unquote, various members of their own board of trustees and calling for a guillotine. Here's Columbia University students on April the 20th, 2024. This is all public record. I'm reading this now. This is on, I guess it's X. Columbia University students yelling at Jewish students, and I quote, "Never forget October 7th. It will not happen. I'm sorry, it will happen. Not one more time, not 5 more times, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, but 10,000 times. The 7th of October is going to be every day for you. The 7th of October, this is to Jewish students, is going to be every day for you," end quote. I guess my question is, Ms. Pacheco, and for anybody else on the panel too, shouldn't we be deporting these students? If we have undocumented students who are here unlawfully in the country, who are violating the law. Let's just be clear here now. This is a violation of the law. And if they're also deliberately inciting persecution of a person on account of their race, which surely calling for the murder of Jews does that, shouldn't we be deporting them? Does anybody think we shouldn't be? Shouldn't we be deporting these students who are here unlawfully? Ms. Pacheco?
Senator, we expect a lot from our scholars, and the scholars and the students that I know love this country, respect this country, and want to and enrich not only the campuses, but also this country.
That's fantastic, and I hope and bet that none of the people that you sponsor are part of this. And I certainly hope that's the case. But I just wondered, is there anybody on the panel who thinks that we should not deport students who are here unlawfully, who are engaging in this activity, who are calling for the death of Jewish students, who are violating the laws of the United States? I mean, shouldn't we be deporting these people? Does anybody want to defend it and say, no, we shouldn't? They should absolutely be here. Yeah, I think it's indefensible. The record reflects there's total silence from the panel. You know, I also think we ought to cancel the student visas, and I've called for this. For those who are here from other countries with a visa, I think if they're part of this, we ought to be canceling their visas. We ought to send a clear message. Actually, Ms. Pacheco, I think it was you in your opening statement put it really beautifully about how part of what we're talking here today represents the character of the country. I think that's very appropriate. And we need to send a message about this activity, not just about the trespassing and the destruction of buildings. That's bad, that's unlawful. But the threats of violence, and in some cases the outright acts of violence against Jewish students, we should send a moral message that if you do that and you are here unlawfully, you should be deported. If you are here on a student visa, you ought to have your visa canceled. This is the United States of America, and we are not going to stand for it. And I would just hope we could speak with one moral voice on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to return to the topic of the hearing and just tell a Rhode Island story, if I may, about a woman named Gabriela who came to the U.S. from Albania when she was 4 years old. 4 years old. I don't know if anybody has a lot of memories from before they were 4 years old, but pretty much all of Mariela's memories are from growing up in Rhode Island. Her parents opened a small business. Mariela earned high honors in high school. She attended Rhode Island Community College and the University of Rhode Island, where she studied to become a nurse. Not a police officer, but a nurse. Pretty good, right? She then earned her master's in business administration from Northeastern University. When she was in college, Mariela was student government president. And she served as the student representative on the Rhode Island Board of Education for 2 years. She also served as a board member on our Commission on Higher Education and Employability. She spent 5 years working as a registered nurse at Rhode Island Hospital in the neurology inpatient unit. At the onset of the COVID pandemic, she became a crisis relief nurse, working where she was most needed in critical areas all around the country. And as many of you will remember, in the early days of the COVID epidemic, it was not known how dangerous that pandemic would be. It was not known the extent of the risk that practitioners, police officers, EMTs, nurses, and doctors were putting themselves at by going about their jobs and their duties. They did. And she did. She now works as a quality performance analyst at Athena Health, and Rhode Island Community College is proud enough of her that they have asked her to serve on the Board of Trustees of the college, and she is now on the Rhode Island Community College Board. Those are the kind of people we're talking about here. And I just want to make sure we're focusing on that. This committee has been the place where some very significant bipartisan immigration reforms began. Chairman Durbin was instrumental, along with then Chairman Leahy and then Ranking Member Graham, in working on a very robust immigration reform that got 70 plus votes on the Senate floor. I don't want to say 78, but it got a big bipartisan vote on the Senate floor. It was sent over to the Republican-controlled House, where nobody would give it a hearing, nobody would give it a vote, nobody would allow it in committee, nobody would allow it on the floor. It was just squelched, even though there was such a significant bipartisan vote for it in the Senate. So at the hands of the Republican Speaker, all that good Senate work went to waste. Recently, we've seen months of work take place on immigration reform. We stopped supporting our ally in Ukraine while we tried to hash through that. After all that work, after being presented with the most comprehensive immigration bill in 40 years, a bipartisan bill with the lead negotiator on the Republican side, the deeply conservative James Lankford, a bill that would have added resources to the border, added agents, added judges, added detention space, that would have upped our fentanyl detection capability dramatically, that would have tightened up standards in various programs, particularly the asylum program, that had the support of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal editorial page, who don't exactly love Democrat initiatives. After all of that, again, one Republican took it down. In this case, it wasn't the Speaker refusing to take it up. It was the soon-to-be nominee of the Republican Party, the leader of the Republican Party, who said, don't do this. Don't do this. I want the issue. I want a mess. I want to run on this. And obediently, our colleagues took it down, wouldn't vote for it, pulled it apart, and that was the end of that. We're still ready to go. And I hope that after those two unpleasant experiences, this committee is not so disappointed that we can't go forward. I do know that Chairman Durbin has many, many years of extremely sincere and diligent pursuit of this. Senator Graham has been involved in bipartisan immigration efforts for a very long time. It may take a moment for things to cool down and us to reboot, but this committee will be a good place for that, and I salute the chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And your summary of the current status of legislation could not be more accurate. Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, I want to pick up just where Senator Whitehouse left off. I came to the Senate, as you know, in 2013, right after a bipartisan group of senators courageously met in the middle and wrote an extraordinary bill that would have addressed many of the issues and concerns opportunistically being politicized right now. And that bill failed because House Republicans blocked it. And so for my time entering the Senate, to what I watched with disbelief, I didn't think this place could shock me anymore. But to see someone who I consider such an honorable person being willing, in Senator Lankford, to join in good faith negotiations, to work for months and months, to have our caucus of Democrats move further than many of our caucus wanted us to move and meet in the middle on a bill that would provide billions of dollars to secure our border, would invest in significant technology that would help us to stop fentanyl from coming through, that would put billions of dollars in better processes to adjudicate people so that the nightmares that the Nobles family has endured would stop, that would create new laws and new abilities that were applauded by the very people who every day stand on our border, the officers' union, and to have that bipartisan bill objected to people, of course, on both sides of the political spectrum, but that had enough votes in this body to pass, and then to have President Trump demonize this bipartisan bill that his own Senate party members were saying we would not get a better deal under a Trump presidency. It astonished me. Immigration should not be a problem, it should be an opportunity. We should secure our southern border. Democrats have voted time and time again to put more resources into doing just that. But the political opportunism, the playing into the tribalism, the manufactured outrage is so hurting this nation, wounding us, not just in our own safety and security, but in our own economic opportunity. We are losing billions of dollars to our economy because we have such broken immigration laws. There are people that are graduating from our finest institutions with degrees in things that half of Congress can't spell, and we're kicking them out of our country. When I meet with agricultural leaders, they say time and time again that we should be ashamed of our laws. And when I hear testimony from people who contribute billions of dollars to our country's economy, who are our first responders, who teach our children, dreamers, and we put their lives every single day, they live with fear and anxiety. I can't imagine what it's like to have that kind of cortisol pumping in your brain every single day, afraid that one small thing that could happen could have you deported from the country, the only country you've ever known. And so God bless this panel. But as Ms. Pacheco said, this is not her first testimony. I mean, we should be embarrassed in this place that we've had for the entire career of my Senate, from a bipartisan bill to a bipartisan bill, all the time in the middle, we've gone through this exercise of rehashing the same thing, of having people come before Congress telling their painful, emotional, hurtful stories, and to what end? To have it destroyed by opportunism. And this isn't a both sides thing. The bill before I came in here was stopped by House Republicans, and the bill that just got done by Langford, who's had his career on the line. A right-wing conservative senator has had his career on the line because he was bold enough to say we could meet in the middle on this issue. So I'm at, my entire Senate career has been a source of deep frustration on an issue that we should seize and seize an opportunity, and not this continued crisis that politicians are taking advantage of every single day. Mr. Chairman, I have no questions for this incredible group of leaders, many of whom I know personally and have talked to for years. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Booker. Senator Welch.
I want to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Booker, and I appreciate your advocacy over the years. I feel the same way. You know, we all have a story, but I was inspired by a young man named Juan Conde who came to Vermont several years ago to go to medical school. And he came from Mexico with his mom when he was 5 years old. And how does somebody go from being a 5-year-old, crossing the border, living in Texas for some time, and then getting up to Vermont? His mom died of cancer, and that inspired him to go to medical school and then to get a research degree. I mean, it's astonishing how wonderful this person was, and he was my guest at a State of the Union. And Senator Booker, you know, I was in the House for a while, and we passed in the House the DREAMER Act. And there was such excitement because it just gave an opportunity to kids, now adults, to be fully contributing members. And here we have a police officer, we've had so many people in the military, so many people have contributed so much. And I think there's universal agreement that if you're a child who has no control over where mom or dad takes you, that's different than showing up at the border when you're an adult for whatever reason that may be. That's just different. It's a child who then found it in himself or herself to become an extraordinary contributor to our economy and bring a lot of love to a lot of people in this country. So Senator Durbin, I just want to thank you for your tireless advocacy on behalf of the Dreamers. I know you'll never stop. You're a stubborn guy. So we've got like a kind of a persistent champion here, and it's really tremendous. We do have to deal with the border. We have to have a secure border. You know, Senator Tillis is right about that. And I was so pleased that we had the opportunity to vote. You know, Senator Langford did take a long step to reach a practical way of securing the border, and Senator Murphy and Senator Sinema did as well. And I was ready to vote for that. I was ready to vote for comprehensive immigration reform when the Senate passed a bill. Senator Durbin, you were part of that, and it came to the House. But then Speaker Boehner wouldn't even allow us to vote on it. Very, very frustrating. So I can only imagine what it's like for all of you and for all of you and people in your situation. So I just want to express my respect for what you're doing. You know, the other issues when there's a criminal act, you know, this is heartbreaking, what we hear about. There's got to be tough prosecution on that. You know, there's got to be law and order. There has to be. But to conflate that with the overall issue of, in my case, this young 5-year-old Wong being brought here, becoming a doctor, doing a medical research, they're two different things that get conflated, and I think it does damage to us making progress. So since all the questions have been asked, I appreciate the opportunity to make a statement in solidarity. And again, I want to end by thanking Senator Durbin for his tireless efforts here. It's just in his heart and in his soul, and one day we're going to get the relief that justice requires. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say for the record, I find it offensive that the good senator did not use all of his time to grandstand in any way and yielded time back to the senator from California. That's so unsenatorial of him, and he's not a House member anymore. He needs to reclaim all of his time.
He has in fact violated Senate tradition, but we'll give you extra time next round. The most patient member of the committee, Senator Butler.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I am also going to be unsenatorial and violate all the rules as well. All of the questions, meaningful questions, in my opinion, have been asked and you all have answered with such passion and commitment and patriotism. And so I just appreciate all of you for your participation and presence here. Ms. Noble, I do have a daughter. She's 9 years old. I think everybody in the Senate, whether they are a Democrat or a Republican, knows that I wake up every single day and come here in the name of my own daughter. I could not imagine your family's pain. And I just want to offer my sincerest apologies to you and to your family. And know that there are those, while there are those who would suggest that because we support this group of this community finding a pathway to citizenship, that we cannot stand with you in the prosecution of criminals who took something away from your family. I want to assure you that that is not the case. And all of us believe that the person who took your daughter's life and caused your family's pain should be prosecuted and held to the fullest extent of the law. Chair Durbin, your decades-long commitment to this community and to this issue is immeasurable and cannot be repeated in any way. And I know that those of you who have taken this journey with Chair Durbin for the last 2 decades know that you have a never-ending, relentless champion. And just know that there are others who stand with him. I represent the state with the largest number of DACA recipients, California, 185,000. DACA recipients. And I sat here patiently, Chair Durbin, because they deserve voice. And as their representative, temporary or permanent, I wanted to be here to give them voice. And so, Ms. Pacheco, I do have one question for you. California is not only home to the largest number of DACA recipients, it's also home to the largest number of Hispanic serving institutions, 172 of them. Your organization's work is about scholarship and the pursuit of higher education. And so these Hispanic serving institutions, many of them have created what's come to be known as dream centers, supporting undocumented students who are on campus as students in pursuit of higher education and greater contribution to our state and to our country. Can you talk about the importance of these dream centers in higher education? How do they actually enhance the academic performance and experience of undocumented students, dreamers, who are seeking to find not only connection and belonging, but community, often in institutions that didn't necessarily have them in mind when these institutions were created.
Thank you, Senator. That's a really important point. And at the Dream.us, while not all our institutions have centers, they do have a person called a scholar advisor that is the linchpin, is the person that is there to support our students. In reality, as Senator Booker talked about, our students go through a lot of anxiety, stress, their lives. Any day, they listen on the news, they hear about what's happening on the legal challenges. I'm sure that many of them are watching this today. And they, having a home, having somebody that they can talk to, having somebody that can provide them with the support that they need, not only helps them academically, but also helps them with their stress and managing their mental health.
Thank you, Ms. Pacheco. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the students and activists, advocates, patriots who have chosen to utilize your time so passionately on this issue. We couldn't get this far without you, and we won't get all the way there without you either. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Senator Durbin for his passionate and constant advocacy. I've been very proud to work with him over the years, and I know, Ms. Pacheco, you testified in 2013 when we came very close to a bill, and we have since then continued to work on it. So you should know, all of you should know, that we're not going away, we're not abandoning this effort, whatever the outcome of this hearing, and I think you can tell from the tenor of some of my colleagues that we're not unanimous in favor of the Dreamers, but we are not giving up. And we're not giving up in part because of you individually and your stories, which are so inspiring to Americans. And I find in Connecticut that the success stories like yours are really powerful and compelling. One of those stories is of a Connecticut dreamer, Medigan Atgonya Bayar, who arrived in the United States from Mongolia when she was 11 years old. She grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, and she met all the criteria for the DACA program, but she is still one of the 100,000 applicants stuck in legal limbo during Texas lawsuit against the program. And despite not being eligible for financial aid because of her immigration status, she graduated from the University of Connecticut in 2019 with a degree in biology. She was working to fund her education, and she was taking care of her younger brother at the same time that she was studying, and her parents were working long hours to put food on the table and pay their rent. She graduated. She hoped to attend medical school. She wanted to gain experience by working in a biology lab. But the jobs that she found required work authorization or permanent residency. Without DACA or the DREAM Act, she had to put that plan on hold. She's continued to contribute to her community. In fact, she's now operation manager for Connecticut Students for DREAM, which has done great work in our state. But this one example, I think, speaks volumes, as do your stories, about how important this measure is, not just for the individuals, but for our communities and the contributions that people make. So I would like to ask you, Ms. Pacheco, about the feelings that others may have being in this kind of legal limbo, how it affects their aspirations, their hopes, and their desire to achieve the American dream, which is simply to have an opportunity to learn and earn and move forward.
Yeah. Senator, in 2010, myself and 3 friends decided to do a walk from Miami to Washington, D.C. And every single day, we were putting ourselves at threat of deportation by sharing our story and being opened. But every single day in the morning, I would put on my shoes, tie my laces, and go out there because I love this country. That is what every single one of our scholars and dreamers do. And every single day is uncertain for them, but they believe that one day America is going to recognize them, that they belong here in this country. For our scholars during the pandemic, one of our students was a nurse. He says, every day I would put my gown on, and even though I was putting my own life at risk, I was there to ensure that my patients were well taken care of. And let me assure you, Senator, that not one of those patients ever asked our student, a nurse, if he had DACA, an immigration status, or what. But he still did it despite working 80 hours a week because this is his country, this is his home.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. I thank all the members who were part of this, and I certainly thank our panel. Ms. Nobles, I want to make a point very clear because I think about what you've gone through, and no one should ever experience what you've experienced. And so that you understand, I accept Senator Tillis's challenge that on a bipartisan basis we come together and do something, not just about DACA and Dreamers, but about the border as well. And I think we start with some basic premises. Number one premise is we have to have an orderly process at the border. People can't overwhelm the system and come in without any type of verification. Secondly, we've got to make sure we let the world know that we cannot take everyone. I understand, as the son of an immigrant, the draw of the United States. And we should have immigration. I support immigration, but it has to be in an orderly way and numbers have to be manageable. But to your particular experience, we have got to make certain that no one is ever knowingly allowed to come into the United States who would be a danger to anyone else. That means being careful as we can be. We owe it to everyone living in the United States. We owe it to you and your experience to meet that goal. I think we can reach that common ground. I hope we can if political circumstances improve. Dr. Wong, Professor Wong, we have this new thing in the committee. If you ever belong to an organization, you are automatically responsible for everything they've ever said and done. Whether you knew about it or didn't, whether you participated in it, however you voted on it. I have to confess I'm worried. For probably 6 years, I was a card-carrying uniform member of the Boy Scouts of America. I don't know what they did in the 1950s, but someone on this panel may hold me responsible for it. So that's a new line of questioning, and most people understand it's an unfair line of questioning. Let me just also say, I want to acknowledge all my staff for the work they do, but I want to particularly acknowledge Joe Zogby. Raise your hand, Joe. He's been with me from the start. When we introduced this bill, Joe sat down at the table and came up with the bipartisan effort to name it the DREAM Act. So he's been there from the start. Anything we've achieved, I owe to Joe and my fine staff people working with him. I just asked Joe a question. I knew that he would know the answer. What was the date of the Saturday when we had a vote on the DREAM Act years ago? And the galleries were filled. You remember this, Gaby?
Yes.
Galleries were filled with young people wearing caps and gowns. There were dreamers who wanted to go to school or wanted to finish school or wanted to brag about the fact that they'd finished school. And they filled the galleries of the Senate on a Saturday morning. And we fell short, just a few votes, but we fell short of passing the DREAM Act. I went to a church nearby, a couple blocks away, and it was one of the saddest meetings I've ever had. These people, young people, were so determined to finally break through and to get recognition for what they had done with their lives and what they wanted to do with their lives, and we fell short in the Senate. We've passed it in other times, but never, I think, never as much of a build-up as it was that year. I said to them then, and I say to you now, I'm not giving up on you. Don't give up on us. We're going to fight this battle and continue to fight it until we prevail. We have so many people that stand behind you, believe in you. Many of them are here today. I want to move to enter into the record a number of statements from organizations, including the Immigration Hub, Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, and the Evangelical Immigration Table. Without objection, these statements will be included. So thank you for coming, to everyone at the panel. Thank you for being part of this hearing. This meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee stands adjourned.